There are a lot of fears in the world. People are afraid of different things. I stood on the ground at my last parish looking up at the scaffolding in the front of the building, a very large sandstone church with two towers going about 120 feet high. And if you want to know 120 feet, the tower we have is only about 77 feet. So we're talking high. There were three men up there who were doing tuck pointing, chiseling out the old mortar that had kind of decayed, some places was absent altogether, and replacing it. And I watched those three men with a lot of trepidation. They were moving around, they were doing all kinds of things, walking from one tower to the other on the scaffolding. I knew they had a harness and they were tethered, but nonetheless, there was no way I could see myself going up there. Later in the day, when the men were down on terra firma and I was chatting with them, I told them how I admired that they could go up there like that. And the one young man, he just had this big grin. He said, "Father, that's easy to do, but let me tell you a secret. There's no way on earth you would ever get me to ride one of those crazy rides up at Cedar Point. Some people are afraid of heights, others are afraid of roller coasters. Never the twain shall meet." So this is not a checklist, but how many people here, be honest, we are afraid of heights, spiders, flying, driving across those long bridges. Maybe we're afraid, if we've been in our house for a couple months, afraid to even go out. Some people are afraid of standing in front of a crowd and talking. We have fears, and lots of these fears are not rational. You don't analyze them. They may have come from some event early in someone's life, maybe an event that somebody scared you at a particular time. But most of those fears we learn to live with, or we avoid the situations. So let me make it really, really clear. When Jesus said, "Do not be afraid," he's not talking about those fears. That's not what this gospel is all about. Because there's another category of fear that Jesus is addressing, and that is the fear of responsibility. That is the fear of taking on a new job or a new mission. That is the fear of being sent forth when you're not sure if you're equipped for it. That is the fear of possibly falling on your face, the fear of failure. Jesus talked to the crowds, but in this case, he's talking specifically to the 12 apostles. And he says, "Do not be afraid." And if you notice, he says it 3 times in this passage that I just read. Let me give you the context. This is chapter 10 of Matthew's gospel. Since we're back into ordinary time, we're just thrown in to chapter 10. But this is already about 2/3 of the way into chapter 10. It starts off with Jesus calling the 12 apostles, and they're all listed by name, all 12 apostles. Then he sends them forth on mission. And it's always that thing in the gospel. We're called and then we're sent. Called and sent. Then Jesus adds a little thing after he sends them on mission. He says, "Oh, by the way, you need to know, they're going to hate you. There'll be persecutions. You'll be criticized. Some people will drive you out." And then comes this passage when Jesus says, "And when these things happen, do not be afraid." Do not be afraid. This particular passage has special poignancy for me because of my own experience with this passage. A lot of you know that the Sunday readings are on a 3-year cycle. So every 3 years we read the same passages. In 3 years, if you are at every Mass, you read all 4 Gospels pretty thoroughly. So go back 5 cycles. 5 times 3, 15. Go back 15 years. So that takes us back to June of 2005. That was the year that the bishop had appointed me to go forth into the wilderness of Wood County and establish a new parish. These were the readings we had. I'm sending you forth. Do not be afraid. But I can remember one particular conversation with Bishop Blair, the bishop at the time, that I've shared with very few people. I was sitting in his office, and he was very supportive of the new parish. By this point, it was middle of June. The parish had already been named, Pope John the 23rd, at that time, Blessed John. And the bishop said to me, he said, "Herb, I am now officially appointing you as pastor of this new parish." Then he went on to say, "And if it doesn't work out, I'll appoint you somewhere else." I said, "Bishop, what are you talking about?" And then he said, well, in the Archdiocese of Detroit, where he was from, there had been several times they had tried to start new parishes and nobody went to them. I think I was so flabbergasted I didn't say a word. So I'm driving home afterwards back to Mansfield, 2 long hours of driving, and I'm thinking about that. And I think I was appreciative that the bishop gave me this warning that sometimes these missions, these ventures, don't succeed. I was happy to know that. At the same time, I have to confess that those words he said translated into my mind, them's fighting words, Bishop. Somehow I just was more motivated than ever. But probably underlying everything, I was convinced that this is the work of the Holy Spirit. I could trust God. And even if it did not work out, I was still okay if I was trusting God. See, that's the thing. The antidote to fear is not being pushy or running everything or being tough. The antidote is trust. And the trust allows you to know that God is taking care of you, even if it doesn't work out the way you want it to. Of course, 15 years later, we can say it has worked out. But I have to go into it with complete trust. The Lord continues to call people. The Lord continues to call us by name, every one of us. Go back to baptism. We're called by name. And the Lord continues to send us forth on mission. That's when he says, do not be afraid. And if the Father can watch over every bird of the sky, the Father will watch over you. And even if you stumble, know that you're not alone. That's what trust is all about. And I believe we are still being sent forth. Not just to start new parishes, not just to be priests or sisters. We're still being sent forth to spread the gospel. And this is Father's Day, so let's talk about the fathers. You were called. You were probably given a mission. You might have felt this is bigger than I can handle. This is beyond my scope. How can I live up to this? Especially when your kids become teenagers. How can I live up to this? Trust says we call on the Lord, because the Lord who calls us by name will take care of us. And we have to go back to trust. So dads, keep on praying that you have the courage to live the mission. Keep on praying that you will stay connected with God. Keep on praying that you will keep on praying. In other words, trusting that God will provide. Fathers, happy Father's Day. You are called. You are sent. And in the name of the entire parish here, we are supportive of what you're doing.